How many of you here have heard of the word startup? Amazing. Can any of you name the startups that you are aware of? Zerodha. Then Big Basket, Zepto, Swiggy, Zomato, Ola, and Flipkart, Nykaa. Yes, so this is great news. Okay, this is a great place to start. You guys know what a startup is, right? You are at least naming what these startups are. So who amongst you can define what a startup is? You guys named what startups are, but what is a startup? What is considered as a startup?
Good evening, sir. A startup is setting a financial organization efficiently, which serves even the country and people very efficiently.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Startups? Anybody wants to define? It can be wrong, it's okay.
Startup is a company started by one or more entrepreneurs who want to build their product or start a service for something which it isn't provide, like which is in demand.
Superb. Very interesting to, he spoke about a financial organization, which means that you're starting an organization which has a for-profit motive, which is going to either give a product or a service, which is solving a particular problem. That way you're adding some value to society, right? And you're getting paid for either providing that service or creating that product. So this essentially is a startup. And like you said, it is generally used or rather based on a technology platform. So ಈ startups ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಾನು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಕೇಳಿದೆ, even before I went to the slide, ಅಂದರೆ I wanted to understand whether you are even aware of what a startup is, whether we know the existing startups in the economy today, and what it essentially means. Now what this is proving, andre, I will tell you something. About 10 years ago, I was in college. And if 10 years ago, a guest had come and perhaps asked this question, I would have no answer to give. And perhaps the guest himself would not be asking a question as to what is a startup. Because before 10 years ago, there did not exist a vibrant startup culture or ecosystem in the country. If it has started today, it is thanks to this one man, the Prime Minister of this country, Narendra Modi. Now, round A, round B funding, IPO, exits, valuation of a company, unicorn. Have you heard of all of these terms? Are we familiar with these terms? All of these terms were absolutely foreign, had no place in a young Indian's vocabulary just a few years ago. But today, all across the country, it's not that this is a phenomenon in Bangalore. It's a phenomenon all through the country, especially in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, that the common young Indian today, his lingua has changed, his language has changed, and he's speaking of valuations, he's speaking of startup, he's speaking of angel investing, he's speaking of incubation, bootstrapping, angel investment, pitching an idea. This is an indication that there is something interesting that is happening in the country, which the generation before us did not have access to or was not a part of. The next 20-25 minutes, we will understand how did this startup revolution start? What did the government do to encourage startups? What are the specific policies that were done to encourage this? why it is important, and what is it that you and I, as young Indians, especially engineering graduates who have just started their sojourn journey as engineering graduates, what do you have to gain from all of this? How do you stand to benefit out of the startup revolution? So, now, it is in the early 1900s that the notion of a startup emerged. Most of the global companies today, the multinational companies, whether it is Apple, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Google, whether it is, Cisco, many of these companies, which are household names across the world today, most of them started out as a small entrepreneurial kickstart, which was called as a startup. And most of them used the internet and the technology to not only do their operations, but also scale their operations. So if you read the story of how Google was found or how Apple was founded, you will come across anecdotes of these founders starting these enterprises from their garage. Right? Most of them have these stories. So this was essentially a phenomenon in the West, in the United States primarily, and allinda ಯುರೋಪಿಗೆ ಬಂತು, ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಬಂತು, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಯ್ತು. ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವಿಲ್ಲಿ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ದಿದೆ, ಟೆಸ್ಲಾದಿದೆ, ಲಿಂಕ್ಡ್ಇನ್ ಇದೆ, ಊಬರ್ದಿದೆ, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಇದೆ. After 2000 is when this gained massive momentum all over the world. And ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಯಿತು, ನಿಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರುತ್ತೆ, that India's telecom revolution truly began when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. If you will ask your parents, they will tell you that for the first time in the country, national highways connecting all parts of the country, called the Golden Quadrilateral, was first constructed under Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Now, if that was ensuring physical connectivity of the country, efforts were made to also penetrate digital connectivity of the country. So the initial internet, initial telecommunications infrastructure and ecosystem, and the IT policy and starting up and encouraging of the IT parks, all of that began and got a lot of thrust and encouragement during the 1998 to 2004 kind of a period. So that's when it started slowly. I will give you an example, and I urge all of you to go on YouTube, and especially as Kannadigas and as Bengalurians, it is important for us to understand how Narayan Murthy and his team built Infosys. Because Infosys is that one name which is synonymous with India's IT revolution. Narayan Murthy in an interview says that when they began Infosys and they had to import computers from America, he had to visit Delhi 50 times. And it took him 3 years. This ministry, that department, this officer, that person, to import how many? 5 computers. Because the system and the government had made rules in such a way that young people or young enterprises, if they wanted to start something new, could just not flourish. And this was not true just for electronics or IT industry. It was the same even if you wanted to start an education institution. I'm sure if you will speak to, Paramahamsa sir, he will tell you how the kind of challenges he would have faced to convince government officers, departments, ministers, this, that, running around from pillar to post. As a result of that, there was no encouragement per se for young people to start businesses and technology-led businesses. So much so that 2014, India had about 150 odd startups. 2014, India had about 100 odd startups, 3-digit startups. You know how many startups are there in India today? How many startups? 1,25,000 registered startups in the last 9 years. Imagine 9 years ago, 3-digital ittu. Around 150, 200. Today you have 1,25,000 plus registered startups. This is the startup revolution. Now, India is not just a domestic hub for startups. Among the world, at the global level, India is the third largest startup ecosystem. Third largest startup ecosystem. And guess which is the epicenter of this startup revolution in India? Namma Bengaluru. 100 ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟಪ್ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಶುರು ಆಯಿತು ಅಂದರೆ 40 ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟಪ್ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ ಶುರುವಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಅಷ್ಟು ಟ್ಯಾಲೆಂಟ್ ರಿಚ್, ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್ ರಿಚ್, ಸ್ಕಿಲ್ ರಿಚ್ ಸಿಟಿಲಿ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಇಮ್ಯಾಜಿನ್, ಐ ಟೋಲ್ಡ್ earlier that you will realize how lucky and fortunate we are to be here. So the kind of access that you will get to resources, to skill sets, to networks, to mentors, to opportunities, by the sheer fact that you are geographically present in Bangalore, you are so lucky. ಇದು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಅಡ್ವಾಂಟೇಜಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಕೀಪಿಂಗ್ ದಿಸ್ ಇನ್ ಮೈಂಡ್, ಲೆಟ್ us ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ how the India scenario changed the startups. Why it is important? Okay. Now, for example, how many of you agree that to become a very important voice at the global level, India needs to become economically powerful? Whether it is industries, whether it is service companies, any of these things, it is extremely crucial to make the country rich. This is at the country level. Now, at an individual level, imagine if you have an idea, okay, you think that there's a particular problem and that problem needs to be solved. And you think that, okay, by solving that problem, you will be adding some value to society, and then society can actually pay you for solving that problem. Should you not have the freedom to start an organization, a financial company, to act on your company, on your idea? That is what is a startup. So it's innovation and solving problems. That is essentially what has happened because of the startup revolution. Now, what has the government done to support this? There are 3 things. One, there's an infrastructure that is needed for startups to survive and work. That infrastructure is of 2 kinds. One is the digital infrastructure. The second is the physical infrastructure. Second, suppose somebody amongst you here has an idea to start a business, right? What is the first thing that you need to execute your business? What do you need? You need money, right? You need capital. So you need funding. So the second support that the government is providing is the capital support, the funding support. The third thing is, there are certain businesses, certain ideas that you can execute at a small level, but then there are certain ideas that you only can execute at scale, and to execute at scale, you will need industry level support. You will need support from, say, suppose you I was being told that, they were explaining, the principal was explaining how many patents were filed, how many applications were filed. Suppose you have done some cutting edge research. Now you need to protect your intellectual property. So you need patent laws to protect your intellectual property. So the government has provided 3 kinds of support under the leadership of the Prime Minister over the last 9 years. 1, physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure. 2nd, funding and capital support. 3rd, industry level partnership and legal framework setting up so that if you want to do something, your ideas are protected. Now let us understand what these 3 are and how did they work. Now the government started on 2016 January is when the Startup India initiative was launched. Now, in the last 5 years, about 13,000 crore rupees is the funding that the startups have received. 13,000 crore rupees, this is just the government of India funding that is there. If, for example, you will know that an Ola or a Uber or Zepto or Paytm or Amazon Pay, all of these have millions of dollars of investment from foreign venture capitalists. It's not government funding, but this is government funding of 13,000 crore rupees just to start your company. And then you do something big, you approach the VCs, you approach the angels, and then they will give you the money. So now I will give you an example of the digital infrastructure that was created. Okay? Now what is this digital infrastructure? I will give you a very simple example that all of you can relate to. Governments all across the world till now had only built physical infrastructure. Now what is physical infrastructure? Building a highway, building a port, airport, expressway, metro, suburban rail. Alva? These are all examples of physical infrastructure. So essentially, this is what the governments all around the world had built. The only government in the whole world to build public digital infrastructure upon which people outside of the government apparatus could build products and services, the only government and the only country to have built digital public infrastructure at population scale is Bharat. Now, what do we mean by digital public goods infrastructure? Yar example kodbodu? An example of what is a digital public infrastructure. Can anybody give an example? Yenidu anta? UPI. UPI is a brilliant example. Aadhaar is another example. ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಿದೆಯಾ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಏನೇನು ಅಂತ? Now, government 2014 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೈಮ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಪವರಿಗೆ ಬಂದರು. The very first thing that he realized was that about 50% of the country's population did not have access to as basic a facility as a bank account. ಏನಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ? ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಅಕೌಂಟ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಎಷ್ಟು ಪರ್ಸೆಂಟ್ ಜನಕ್ಕಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ? 50% of the country's population did not have. That too 70 years after independence. Now, if you don't have a bank account, what happens immediately? You will not have access to formal banking system. You will have no savings. You will have no access to insurance. If you want to start a business, you will have no access to institutional credit. So you need to establish that a person who claims to be X is indeed X. So how do you prove that? You need an identity card. How do you give an identity card and prove that person with him? We use the power of digital. We used biometrics, used fingerprints, we used eye detection. ಇದೆಲ್ಲದನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿ ಬಯೋಮೆಟ್ರಿಕ್ಸ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ we proved that if this person who claims to be X is indeed this person. And because it was digitized, it became so easy to verify the identity of an individual. And the government did that at population scale. Imagine this we accomplished. There was a recent study which said that if there was no digital, if there was no Aadhaar, and if there was no UPI, Jandan accounts creation, 49 crore, close to 50 crore Jandan accounts which got created in 5 years, it would have taken 45 years to create that many bank accounts. This was the recent study. Now I will give you an example of digital public goods, Aadhaar, UPI, NPCI, all of these things. Now I'll tell you how this is being used. How government built this, but there are private people who are helping you to make your life easier. Starting from booking your airline ticket on a Make My Trip, to booking a cab on Uber, to using a FASTag, to using DigiYatra, every single product is built on the digital public infrastructure base that the government built. And all of these products, whether it is DigiYatra, whether it is PhonePe, whether it is Uber, whether it is Ola, all of these are private companies which have built products and solutions. This is essentially what has driven the country's startup ecosystem. If your Jandan account, Aadhaar mobile is not connected, how will you use, say, Zerodha to invest? How will you use any platform to do trading? You have to establish your KYC. KYC is established through Aadhaar. So this is the only example in the world where government has built a public digital infrastructure over which all of you as young thinking minds can build products. I was in Norway recently, just a couple of months ago. The whole of Norway's population is less than the population of Bangalore. And Norway found it unbelievable that India could achieve the world's largest vaccination drive in the shortest period of time, in the most seamless manner, with the cheapest rates for 140 crore people. We could do it because of digital. So this is the power of having a infrastructure process. Now there were so many things that the government did. Like for example, there was no GST in the country. So what did GST do? It essentially created one nation, one market. One nation, one tax. This is exactly what it created. Now by making this infrastructure available, you now have apps and products like delivery, porter, let's transport. Imagine how easily these companies are sending one product that you have ordered from Bangalore. They attempt a delivery, didn't happen, send it back to Hyderabad. Somebody else orders, the same thing is sent to Lucknow. How did this happen? Because of GST. One nation, one tax, one nation, one market. This is one way of facilitating the whole startup system. The second example, suppose you start a company, okay? And you realize that your company is failing. Your company is not doing well. Avag ಏನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ನೀವು? What is the option you have? You have to close that company and start something new. Correct? If a particular idea or a particular venture is not succeeding, the quicker you close it and move on to the next one, the better it is for you. But believe me when I say this, before the government introduced the insolvency bankruptcy code, okay, which helps you to start a company easily and close a company easily. Can you believe this? If you had to close down an unprofitable venture, it would take you 3 years. You had to go to High Court, get a liquidator appointed. What all was the procedures? Now what the government did, because startups are, they are born quickly, most of them die quickly, and something new is started. If you will talk to an entrepreneur, they identify themselves as serial entrepreneurs. Right? Have you heard of this term? Kelidira? Now when a serial entrepreneur, he started A did not succeed. He started B did not succeed. He started C succeeded. Or he started 1, 2, 3, all succeeded. So the ease to start a company and the ease to close a company is what the IBC facilitated. So you had so many laws that were made, right? Like GST was made, IBC was made, labor laws were made. Today, directly or indirectly, there are more than 23 lakh young people who are employed by these startups. 23 laksha jana employment sikkide because these laws were made. Then I spoke about the funding aspect. If you want to start up, ಯಾವುದೊಂದು ಐಡಿಯಾ ಇದೆ, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ದುಡ್ಡೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಅದನ್ನು ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ? So there was a 10,000 crore fund that was started, a credit guarantee scheme was availed, and intellectual property idana support kotru. So today there are 1,000+ incubators that are enlisted in the startup incubation policy under the Startup India initiative. Now, Rahul was making a point when he was speaking to me earlier that he wants to start an incubation center, Atal Innovation Center, supported by the government of India here. Now, look at this. In higher education institutions, in 2019, there was 871 innovation cell. And today, there are 3,200+ higher education institutions in the country which have an incubation cell. Now, what is this incubation cell? Let me take a minute to explain to you, because whenever Rahul makes this possible in the institution, it is going to help all of you directly. Suppose you have an idea. Like 2 girls here, 2 boys here, you come together, want to start something new. Now, somebody should handhold you, mentor you, tell you, okay, this is a good business plan, this is not a good business plan, this is a good go-to-market strategy, this is not good, maybe you can tweak your plan like this. Okay, why don't you try a small pilot, right? To explain all of this to you and to support you, you need what is called as an incubation center. Before you go to the market, the product and the idea or the service is tested. And most of these successful companies are out of college companies. So where does innovation start? Innovation starts at your first year. And through the 4 years that you're in college, you would have worked on an idea, gotten some networking support, got some funding support, mentoring support. And by the time you get out of college the 4th year, you need not stand in queue for campus placement. You yourself can come here to campus and hire 4 other people to start your own startup. That is the idea behind the higher education institution startup. The support for this. I told you, this is what they do. Orientation, awareness, exposure visits, trainings, workshops, resource access, all of this. ನಾನೊಂದು ಹೇಳ್ದೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾ, that most of the startups in India are not coming only from Bangalore or cities like this. It comes from tier 1 and tier 2 cities. Just look at this. While Karnataka has a large share of the startups, you have in Uttar Pradesh some 9,000, Gujarat, Telangana, Tamil Nadu. See, the majority of Indian startups are from tier 2, tier 3 cities. And when we speak of startups, somebody recently asked me, what do you think is the most necessary quality for an entrepreneur? And my answer to him was very simple. whether it is a businessman or a political activist, he must know convincingly well his immediate surroundings and the place that he is living in. Because he should be solving problems for his immediate surrounding. Now look at these things. If you see the amount of money that has gone into our agricultural startups, you will have 410 plus active investors in the agri-tech startup space. It is an indication that tomorrow you need not always go and solve some problem that is not immediately touching people's lives. Agro processing, ಅದರೊಳಗಡೆ ಯಾವುದೋ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ, ಅದನ್ನು ಮ್ಯಾನುಫ್ಯಾಕ್ಚರ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಅದನ್ನು ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಡ್ರೋನ್ ಬಳಸಿ ಇಮೇಜಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡೋದು. There are so many tech-based startups that is working in agriculture. Look at that. $2 billion plus funding agri-tech startups in the country have got. And today, it is not just agri-tech. Look at that last one. Space tech. While Tesla is focusing on building rockets and going to Mars, there are Indian startups like Skyroot, which is based out of Hyderabad, which is building satellites and missiles, competing and collaborating with ISRO. Our founder's age is 27, 28 years old. That is the money that they have got, $250 million plus in our space startups. So now you see that India has become a unicorn hub. Before 2014, the total number of startups that the country had, was 100 something. And today we have 100 plus unicorns. That is the difference. And just look at this. The first line here, you only have to read this to understand what is there. 1 out of 10 unicorns globally are today born in India. 1 out of 10. That is the pace at which our unicorns are developing. Illiro ಹುಡುಗರಿಗೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ವಿಷಯ. The reason why we need to be upping our game. Look at that. 46% of startups in India have at least one woman director. So at the leadership levels, people who are starting this up, so see this, the Startup India revolution is not just a Bengaluru urban male phenomena. It is a pan-India phenomena with tier 1, tier 2 cities participating in a large manner, and it is breaking gender barriers because more than 46% of startups have more than one woman director. That is the level to which the startup revolution has percolated. Just look at this one slide. In 2014, the total funding amount that Indian startups had got was $5 billion. 2023, how much? How much? From $5 billion to $141 billion. That is the India startup story for you. We had 350 startups in 2014. We today have 1 lakh plus startups. We had 4 unicorns in 2014 and we have 100 plus unicorns in 2023 today. Now when people ask you, what is the magic that Narendra Modi has done for the young people of this country? This is what you must be telling, that Narendra Modi has given wings to young people to fly high and make their dreams come true. This is what has happened. Now, I only want to leave you all with last one thought. Okay? Now, In 2022 alone, they have created 2.69 lakh jobs. Imagine why it is so important. The reason why the startup revolution is important is because just homegrown startups can create 2.69 lakh jobs for young people and freshers, which is why this is so important. Now, who are the people driving this? Who are the people driving this? And why was it important for us to make this presentation in this college campus and not in any other place where we would have had an older crowd? The startup revolution is being led by young India. It is not the creation of the old. It is the youngsters of India who are leading India's startup revolution. Look at this. Most of the startup founders are in the age group of 26 to 35 years. 26 to 35 years age group ಅವರೇನೆ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ಅಪ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾನ ಲೀಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಯು ವಿಲ್ ಸಿ 20 to 25 years ಅಲ್ಲಿ 15% ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ಅಪ್ ಫೌಂಡರ್ಸ್ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. People who are maybe a few years older than you, they are all founders of startups today. So when I spoke earlier and I told you to dream big and dream so big that you want to dominate the world with your idea, I am telling you that it is possible because there are millions of other young Indians of your age who are trying to dream something like that and also are achieving it. The purpose of this presentation, friends, is to instill in you hope, belief that you can do it too. If somebody 22 years old is founding a startup, why can't you? This is the only thought that I want to implant here. If somebody in 30 years old, 28 years old is building a startup of this kind, so can you. So this is the time for us to make a true difference, and 72% of startup founders are less than 35 years old. 72%. So this is the whole difference. This is what it has happened because the country is moving ahead in a fast-paced manner. Thank you so much. This is all the presentation was.
सही समय है